All right, good evening, folks. We are here tonight to do our program for TOP, that's Transition to Organic Partnership Program by the USDA. I am Holly Morgan. I'm with the West Virginia Farmers Market Association. And tonight we have Mike Erbs from Red Hawk Rise Organics in Jefferson County. He is there with Katie Brownell, that is their property and farm. And then we also have Julie on here, and she will talk to us from Food and Farm Coalition about some other great opportunities with them later at the end of our program. So I will not hold us up anymore. I will go ahead and let Mike get started. So welcome, and we hope you enjoy the presentation tonight.
All right. Thank you, Holly. So today we're going to be talking about organic inspections and taking the worry out of inspections. So we're going to kind of go through all the parts of an inspection, kind of the purpose of it, talk through it. At the beginning here, the majority of what I'm going to talk about here is it from sort of like the inspector regulation point of view. So we'll look at things that the regulation says in terms of what are the requirements for an inspection, so you can see what, as a producer, what you would expect to see, and like kind of why things are happening the way they are based on the requirements for the certifier and to be a certified producer. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about it from the grower perspective, what you can do getting into it, and kind of the things that you need to be thinking about specifically as it relates to you and your inspection. And at that point, if there's any folks with questions, we can certainly talk about that. Although keeping in mind that a lot of this stuff can get very site and operation specific. So I'm going to try to keep it very general here. And definitely, since I'm a crop producer and that's that's what my background is, this will definitely be coming from a crop perspective. Although a lot of this will translates to the other scopes as well, so livestock and handling. So the majority of this is the same, just the specifics of what your records are and the specifics of what they're going to be looking at will be different based on what type of operation you have and the scopes that you're trying to have covered to be certified organic. So moving along, or moving right in, oops, there we go. So the first thing here is let's look at, remind ourselves about the organic certification process. So as a producer, the first thing you'll do is, adopt your practices. We're starting in the top right corner here. And then you submit your application fees to your certifier. The certifier will review your application and determine whether or not you have the ability or currently are satisfying the regulations. They're going to determine if they think that you're capable of it or if you currently are. And if they determine that you are, that's when they will conduct and schedule for your first inspection. And so that first inspection happens. After that, the inspector will submit the report to the certifying agent, who will review it along with your OSP and your application to determine compliance and whether or not they're going to certify you. So they have all your documents now. They have an inspector who's been on site, and then at that point, that's when they make their decision. So in the bottom right corner there, certifying agent issues organic certificate. And then here's where we begin the loop. That happens your annual cycle, where as the producer, you'll provide updates annually. Generally, this will happen over the winter time. And then early in the spring, they'll review, moving up, the certifying agent reviews annual update to verify that it's complete and practices comply. Any changes that have happened, if you want to add things and so on to your operation, adding new land, adding a new scope, for example, if you want to bring on livestock, new crops, any changes you're making. And then after they review that, your reapplication, then an inspection happens again, and the cycle continues. So it's just inspection, reviewing of it, making a decision, then you apply again, and so on and so forth. So hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to be looking sort of at this loop down here at the bottom, the inspection process here that happens annually. So you'll see a lot of these regulation numbers here that I have. So here today, or this slide is 205 400C. So these are all just references back to the what's called the Act or the regulations. This is the National Organic Program. So the National Organic Program has a list of regulations, and without getting into it too much, this is all referencing back. In some of these cases, I have the text verbatim, and we can talk about it. But just so if you needed to go back and reference anything or look, maybe at some of the surrounding text of these sections, that's all there, and that's all searchable and available online. If you just search NOP 205 or National Organic Program, it'll come up with the regulations there, and it's very searchable and so on. So the general requirements for certification here: a person seeking to receive or maintain organic certification under the regulations in this part must permit on-site inspections. So this is definitely a required. So you'll see in the regulations, sometimes it'll say must, sometimes it'll say may, sometimes it'll say may not or must not, but here we must permit on-site inspections with complete access to the production or handling operation, including non-certified production. So that's one thing that is interesting, is they want, if you are doing parallel or split production where you're doing an organic version of what you're doing, or you're producing, even if you're producing conventional, something separate from what you're producing organically, they're permitted to look at that too. So if you've got animal feed for some conventional animals and animal feed for organic animals, we want to assess those situations just to make sure that there's not any sort of cross contamination or anything. So your non-certified production and handling areas are going to be inspected, not to the same degree, but definitely an inspector will want to look at that, and a certifier is going to want the inspector to do that. All structures and offices and provided for in 205 403, which is talking more specifically about inspections, and that's actually what we're going to talk about next year. So in this first section here of 403, a certifying agent must conduct an initial on-site inspection for each production unit, facility, and site that produces or handles organic products, and that is included in an operation for which certification is requested. So that's one of the first bits of that loop that we were talking about there at the beginning, is that the agent must conduct an on-site initial inspection, and it will be conducted annually thereafter for each certified operation that is organic, and for the process of determining continuing certification. So that's the first thing there. So initial inspection, and then 1 year after. So this is the regulation text that spells that out. A great section in the NOP standards here is section 2052, which is all of the definitions. So anytime anything's confusing, even as me, someone who does organic inspections, it's a great place to go. What does regular application mean? You can go look and see, like they have their determination of what periodic or regular, or in this case, inspection. So the NOP, the National Organic Program, defines inspection as the act of examining and evaluating the production or handling operation of an applicant for certification to determine compliance with the act and the regulations of this part. So the act is just the Organic Foods Act. So the inspection is to determine compliance, and that's what we're looking for here, is are you, as an organic farm, doing all the things that are listed in the organic regulations here. So these here are not verbatim from the code. This is just some paraphrasing, just so these are kind of just details that you need to know as a farm who's going to be inspected. So your certifier must conduct your inspection within a reasonable amount of time once they determine that you are complying or capable of complying with the requirements. So they shouldn't have you waiting too long. One important thing is that an authorized representative who is knowledgeable about the operation must be present. And the goal is that person, or at least someone who fulfills that role, will be present for the duration of the inspection. So sometimes you'll have one person who does the records, and then another person will help with the physical tour, or you might have people with different knowledge of different aspects of the records, like somebody has sales, another person's more on the production side of the records. But having an authorized representative there who could speak to all aspects, so that all aspects can be covered at least, is required for inspection. All records up to 5 years old must be available for inspection and to make copies. So you hear about this a lot, is that as an organic producer, you have to maintain your records, and you have to maintain them for 5 years. So anything up to 5 years old is valid for an inspector to ask for. So you want to make sure that you have that available to you or prepared in advance of your inspection. So anything up to 5 years old. In terms of scheduling, so the certifying must arrange and conduct an inspection at least once per calendar year. So we've already talked about once per calendar year, but here the emphasis is on arranging, so that it is a scheduled, a predetermined scheduled inspection. In addition to that one annual one, certifying agents may conduct additional on-site inspections, and these may be unannounced. I don't have a lot of experience with unannounced inspections. We've never had those. I've never done an unannounced inspection. So can't really speak to how they would go. It sounds very complicated and disorienting to me as somebody who likes to have things planned in schedules, as I'm sure most farmers are. The idea of being in the middle of your workday and all of a sudden you have an unannounced inspection. I don't even know how you could do that, but that is something that you are agreeing to. And to that end, certifying agents are actually required to conduct a minimum amount of unannounced inspections, a minimum of 5% of all the operations they certify. So sometimes operations will get earmarked by the certifier as, being that they kind of have an idea they want to do an unannounced inspection, and that usually is, if they're concerned about maybe fraud or usually some sort of like fraud or dishonest behavior. But at the same time, an unannounced one is not necessarily indicative of that, because they were required to do them. So you just might have got the bad draw that year if you are getting an unannounced inspection and they're not really searching for anything specific that they feel like you've done. So yeah, so scheduling, one will be scheduled. They can do additional ones, and those may be unannounced, and unannounced ones are required. So that's what we're talking about here. Okay, so getting more down to the purpose of the inspection. So we talked about that a little bit, but the main thing is to assess whether the operation complies or has the ability to comply with the regulations. So has the ability, that can be, are they like on the verge of doing it, or are we saying like, wow, they're saying they're complying, but I'm looking around, I don't think they have the capacity to comply. So wanting to make sure that not only are they complying, they say they're compliant, but that as an inspector, you feel like they have the ability to comply with the regulation. The next thing here is to verify that the OSP, and that's your organic systems plan, it accurately reflects the operations activities. That's a large part of an inspection, since the certifier, pretty much all they have is your OSP. Your application or reapplication generally is just updating an OSP, which is about 7 to 8 page document with attachments being farm maps, field history, livestock lists, things like that. The total OSP with all the attachments generally can be 30, 40 pages, 50 pages, depending on how much materials you have, how much equipment you have, and how much land and how many different maps you need to have in there. But so that's what the certifier sees, and the goal of the inspection is to have the inspector be there. They're the person who is going to actually see what's going on the ground. And so the certifier says, this OSP, if they're following and doing it, that's exactly what we want to see. And so as an inspector, the inspector will be there comparing what you are doing to what you say you're doing, because the OSP is what you say you're doing. And it says, okay, it says you're doing this with your compost, you're doing this with manure. tell me about that. Is that what you're actually doing? And how are you making sure that's what you're actually doing, and so on. So verifying the OSP's accuracy. And then finally here, ensuring that the prohibited substances have not been applied. Application of prohibited substances is one of the quickest ways to lose your certification, or at the very least have to take certain fields out of production. So that's one thing that as a producer, you want to be very careful of anytime you're using a new input or doing any kind of materials or wanting to do anything on your farm. It's always good to check with your certifier. And that's where choosing a good certifier that you can have a good relationship is helpful. Where you, because they want you to be certified. They don't want you to be putting prohibited substances on, so they're going to really help and guide you with that. To do these things, the inspector will observe the operation, review your documents, interview the producer. It's all about just information gathering and observation. And that's what the inspector is. They're not there to be a police officer. It's just observations, and they report their observations. Oh, and at the bottom corner here, this says NOP 2601. When you see these 4-digit code documents like this, that this is referencing, those are guidance documents that are published as a companion to the regulation, and they tend to be a little more plain in their language. And the idea is that they will explain and interpret some of the more dense regulation language. So sometimes it can be useful. They'll really spell things out. Like a recent one was on bleach use, where there was some vagueness in the regulation, so they kind of spelled out what that exactly will look like in the guidance documents. So that's another place to look for information too, as to what you can and can't do, and to help you interpret some of these things. So what to expect during the inspection here. This is sort of what, as someone who's been trained to be inspector, these are sort of the things that I've been trained to do, the parts of the inspection. So this is probably what any inspector will likely bring to the table here. The first thing is to have an opening meeting. They're just going to want to introduce themselves, tell you, why they're there, who they're there for, just kind of lay everything out. They'll definitely reiterate confidentiality. So that's important to know as you're revealing all this information and allowing this person to come onto your farm and your operation and view your documents and everything that you're doing, even your conventional, if you have that production, is that there's strict confidentiality that the inspector and your certifier has to maintain. And in that opening meeting, the inspector will probably go over things that they want to see and just the different parts of the inspection here. Maybe cover some stuff that maybe they want to bring up specifically. So opening meeting, just to get to know one another and kind of set the table for what's going to happen over the course of the inspection. Another component of the inspection is the physical inspection. So the inspector will review each production unit, facility, site where the operation produces or handles organic products. So if that's your home farm, that's going to be your storage areas, your wash pack area, any greenhouses you have, certainly all your fields, all your boundaries and borders. They're going to want to look at your crops and so on. So getting out there, looking at your equipment, looking at what you've got, what you have in storage, any inventory you have on hand, they're going to want to be looking at all those sorts of things. Physical inspection will also probably include looking at where you store some of your inputs, some of your materials, and just having a look to make sure that there's nothing there that isn't listed on your OSP document, and so on. So that's one of the big components of the inspection. The other big component is the records review, which two of the components of that is traceback and mass balance. As a producer, you don't really have to know what that is. I will explain that a little more, I think, on a coming slide, or maybe even the next one. But those are just tools used by the inspector to confirm that there's linkage between documents, that what you're doing can be documented. So they do a full audit, basically from seed well, if you go trace back from when you sold something all the way back to the seed and you planted it and everything that happened in between, any sort of field activity, inputs, harvesting, and so on. So they're going to want to see a paper trail, basically. Mass balance is kind of similar. It's looking at, do the inputs match the outputs? Does the amount of eggplant seed that you're planting translate? The amount is the given the amount of eggplant seed that you planted, does the amount of eggplant you produce, does that make sense? So if you had this much eggplant seed, and you planted these many and you got this germination rate, and then when you went to transplant them, you put them at this spacing and in this many rows and so on, and each plant produces so many. Like that's the kind of thing that an inspector is going to go through, and they're just going to want to and you don't have to know all of that. You just have to have the records of what you did and the things that you used and how much you sold. So just what came in and what came out, and whether or not those agree with one another. And those are the tools that an inspector has to just audit your records. Another big part of the records review that's not listed here is going over your OSP and going over anything that the certifier might want updated, anything that the inspector saw they might want clarification for. A lot of times there are incomplete. I mean, as a producer, you try not to do this, but as someone who's inspected and seen a lot of OSPs, a lot of times there's incomplete sections that the inspector might want to see an incomplete section completed. And I don't think I'd mentioned this anywhere. I was going to mention it towards the end as the inspector side of things, but or as the producer side of things. As a producer, you generally will get communications from your certifier, contingencies for continued certification. Like if they said, oh, the inspector noted this, we want you to correct this, like corrective actions they want you to take. And during the records review, the inspector is often given sort of like a prompt from the certifier about certain aspects they want you to look, in particular, follow-ups from last year, follow-ups from communications you guys have had, you and the certifier have had since your last inspection. And the inspector will want to go over those communications and make sure that there's no loose ends there. And then at the very end, the inspector will conduct the exit interview. So that's once they've done all their observations. They usually will take a moment to kind of compile their notes and things. And the exit interview is actually a prescribed formal part of the inspection process. It's written into the regulations. And this is just so that there's transparency and nobody's blindsided or anything. But at the exit interview, the inspector will go over, generally they'll go over observations they think are potentially not compliant, areas where you might, as a producer, be not compliant or not satisfying the regulations. And they'll kind of go through, things that they noticed and that they're going to report back to the certifier. And that's all it is. They're saying, I saw this, the regulation says that it's supposed to be like that. And so I'm not saying one thing or the other, but I'm saying my observation, and then it's up for the certifier to determine that. So that is what the exit interview is. And it's just so you have that information so you're not blindsided later. So you know exactly what the inspector is going to be reporting. You'll get a document. Usually there's a hand filled out paper, an exit interview sheet form that they'll fill out with all of those sort of like areas of concern or issues that they've noticed. And you'll get a copy of that, and you and the inspector will both sign that. So that becomes like an official part of your record. Exit interviews, 15 minutes generally. And it's also an opportunity for you to ask questions and definitely things that you maybe want to take note of, so you can contact your certifier to see what they think about those things, so you can if you're concerned about them or if they actually are issues, that you can get them fixed sooner than later. So getting more into some more of the specifics of those things here. The inspection will include an evaluation of the OSP that the operator maintains on site to ensure that it's updated and that they're implementing those things and that it complies with the regulations. So that's what I mentioned that wasn't on the last slide, is that going over the OSP with a fine tooth comb is pretty standard in an inspection. And without a doubt, the inspector has before they come to your farm, this is what one of the documents they review in preparation for coming in. And so they'll inspector generally will kind of come in with areas that they want to discuss within the OSP. So it's not that they're going to take a fine tooth comb to it in the inspection, but beforehand they will have, and then they'll kind of like jump to the areas that they want to touch on during the inspection. Specifically for crop producers, here's some things that they will be looking at: evaluation of soil and nutrient management, adjoining land use and buffer zones. That's a big one when it comes to your field, the field tour. So they're going to want to make sure the buffer zones are areas to make sure that you're not getting drift or contamination from your neighbors with prohibited substances and things like that. Making sure that your cattle aren't reaching their neck across the fence to be eating conventional, pasture or something like that. So buffer zones and your adjacent land use, land areas, what's happening there, going over usually that's kind of done with the maps and then the physical inspection. Land use history, generally what they're going to want to be doing there is just updating, like, is what you said you were going to do last year what you actually did. So this year it's 2024. They're going to look, usually 3 years of history is what's included in your OSP. So they're going to go back and look at, okay, here's what you said you did in 23. What did you actually do in 23? Okay, and then now, given that, let's look at what you're planning on doing in 2024 and make sure that there's no areas of concern here as it relates to crop rotation, or for example. Production capacity of the land. Again, we want to make sure that if you're selling X number of something, that the inspector feels you have the capacity to produce that. Again, that's a fraud concern there, to make sure that you're not all of a sudden selling 10 times what the inspector feels like you have for the capacity of your fields, if you're getting, for example, that. They're going to want to look at your seeds and planting stock use. Usually that's invoices, seed packets, seed searches. If you're using conventional seed, they're going to want to see the seed searches to make sure that you went through the steps to be using conventional seed, to make sure it's non-GMO, not treated, and that you tried to use organic seed. Look at your crop rotation practices. Again, that goes with the land history use and going forward. Pest control practices, harvest, labeling, shipping, just all your records. Again, with those trace back and mass balance, a lot of that stuff will come up with the harvesting, labeling, shipping. Labeling is generally if the certifier is looking for that. If you're using retail labels, they're going to just want to make sure that usually that's seen by the certifier beforehand, because that's something that can be easily emailed as a picture of a label. But sometimes this inspector will just want to make sure, yes, you're using the ones that you say you're using. For wild crop producers, wild crop's in the middle of kind of being broken out into its own thing, but for the time being, it's still kind of under crop. But a lot of the same stuff, the inspector's going to want to look at your harvest areas, look at the sustainability component to your practices, to making sure that you're doing things in a way with conservation in mind, and reseeding or pruning you're doing. So just evaluating the practice that you're doing in the field for your wild crops. Some more items here that will be included in your inspection, but not limited to. Verification of operations, production, or handling capacity. I touched on that already. Evaluation of the record keeping system and verification of activities through appropriate records. So as you probably know, that record keeping systems have to be they can be tailored to the specific operation. So you know, your records will be set up the way that you want them to be for you to use, but at the same time, they have to be easily audited, readily audited. So the inspector is going to want to go through and just look at your field activity logs, your field history plans, your materials use logs, all kinds of things like that. Then they'll do a reconciliation of volume of organic products received against with the amount of organic products shipped, handled, and or sold. That's your in-out balance. I don't know why it says traceback is a little different, but it's just looking at your records inside and out to make sure that you're tracking all the things you need to track, and that everything's all linked together, and that the documents agree with what's happening. Sometimes sampling's done. I don't think we've ever had sampling done during any of our inspections. I certainly haven't taken any samples as an inspector, but sometimes that's done out of hand, I think, depending on your size and scale and what kind of farm you are. The inspector will provide you a receipt for any samples taken. I think sampling is generally done at the cost of the certifier. And so you'll see that they'll be looking for evidence of prohibited materials on like herbicides, things like that. And then sometimes they can test for GMOs. They can test your corn to see if there's GMO seed in your corn, for example. But that's why sampling is generally done, to look at those sorts of things for GMOs and materials. Even more about tracebacks and mass balance. So traceback, again, just for full completeness, is used to show that an organic product can be traced back to its field of origin or supplier using information such as lot numbers, invoices, or field activity records. So we want to see a continuity of sort of the organic. So if you bought organic, so you got organic seed. So their product was organic seed. That's now your input. And we want to see every link in the chain from who you got it from until where it went, and that it was organic in all steps through the way, and we can trace that. Mass balance in-out audit used to show that the crops produced, harvested, stored, and sold coincide with the production records. So again, just what went in matches what came out, and that it makes sense based on what the weather was that year, where you are, what the crop is. It's based on a variety of factors that that they'll be basing that on in terms of whether or not it makes sense for both sides of that balance. If what came in matches what came out within reason. OSP updates, like I said, this will happen here. Here's how it's kind of spelled out, is that inspectors often discover new information or documentation during on-site inspections. The inspector may accept additional OSP updates during the inspection and should provide any new information received on-site to the certifier. That's definitely, that's the whole point of why the inspector is there. So any updates, they will certainly pass along to the certifier. If the inspector and operator update the OSP during the inspection, then the inspector should provide a copy of the update to both operator and the certifier. This is usually done with like pictures, document capture, leaving the original copy with the operator. A lot of this is done at the discretion of the operator because it is their OSP, and so they're the ones who are determining that. Anything that's updated usually is going to get signed and dated, just that those updates were made. And again, usually then the inspector will take a picture of it, and that gets attached added as an attachment to the inspection report. And then those updates will become part of your OSP going forward. And just a reminder, in case you don't know this, but again, your OSP is a living document that's continuously updated. And so this is just another step in which that happens. Anytime you want to add a new material, that gets added to your OSP, again, living document. Anything there's changes get added in. Certainly at inspection is a time when somebody's there sitting down with you looking at it. So that definitely has the potential for there to be a significant number of updates if that's needs to happen. At the end of the inspection, the inspector conducts an exit interview with an authorized representative of the operation. During the exit interview, the inspector communicates any potential non-compliances observed and requests any additional information that may be missing from the OSP. Generally, that would be at the request of the certifier. Because once the inspector leaves, their job is done. So you don't want to be sending stuff. I mean, producers will try to do this, and you probably would want to do this. It's like, oh, I didn't have that one thing, like I couldn't find it, but let me find it and I'll send it to you. Generally, you want to be prepared, so you're not doing that. Inspector's going to want you to be prepared, so you're not doing that. But anytime there's any sort of follow-up stuff that needs to happen, that's definitely between you and the certifier at that point. And generally, the inspector will just make a note of that so that they can expect whatever you've promised to provide in the future. This is an important thing to keep in mind when you're interacting with an inspector, is that inspections are not consulting visits. Inspectors may ask questions, collect and provide information, and explain the regulations or the certifier's requirements. Inspectors are prohibited, however, from advising the operator on how to overcome barriers to certification. So the inspector's not they're not going to tell you what to do. If they do, they're overstepping their bounds. An inspector should never say, here's what you have to do. You need to do this or anything like that. They will provide technical assistance. That's what explaining the regulations are. They'll tell you what the requirement is. They may say, and here's how I've seen some operations handle that, but by no means are they going to say, here's what you need to do. They're definitely prohibited from advising. And to that end, inspectors do not determine certification. Getting back to what we talked about earlier, they're strictly to observe and report. And so they're not going to be the ones to determine your certification. That is completely up to the certifier, and that's where your relationship with the certifier comes back in. Inspection report. Certifying agent shall within a reasonable time provide the applicant with a copy of the on-site inspection report as approved by the certifying agent for any on-site inspection performed. So you will definitely get a copy of that. It's my understanding that usually it will take longer than you want it to. But you'll definitely get it and have a chance to review it and so on. And the inspector, and there can be some contingency, some follow-ups that the certifier wants you to do that comes along with your inspection report that says, okay, here's this, and then they provide a notice of determination and say, okay, next year we'd like to see this, or before, in the next 60 days, please send us this in, and so on. So it can come with contingencies like that, but they will definitely be providing to you hopefully within a reasonable amount of time. Well, they're required to within a reasonable amount of time. What that means is sometimes it can take a couple months, but yeah, and the inspectors don't always know that. Inspectors usually have to get their inspections reports in within a week or two, and then after that, it's in the certifier's hand, and that can take a few weeks. Granting certification. So like I said, the inspectors are not the ones who do this. This is the certifying agent. So within a reasonable time after completion of the inspection, the certifier agent must review the inspection report and the results and any additional information requested. If they determine that your OSP and all your procedures and activities are in compliance, then they'll grant certification. So this just kind of spells that out in very, very strict terms. And then what I was getting at in terms of the determination letters here is that last sentence is they may include requirements for the correction of minor compliances within a specified time period as a condition of continued certification. That is not uncommon. All right. So this is where, if anybody had any questions at this point, we can talk with some questions, and then if there's no questions, we can get on to talking about what this looks like a little more from the as a farmer. I put my farmer hat on. That was more me talking as an inspector. Do we have any questions at this point?
Does anyone have any questions? Oh, go ahead, Denise.
Okay, this kind of goes back to what the last thing you touched on, where the certifier may take longer than you expect to actually certify. So if let's say farmer A was deciding that they were going to transition to organic production and become certified organic, they should probably start early, like maybe in December of the year before, or
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of certifiers do permit, you can like pay extra to expedite things. Maybe you don't have to pay extra, but they definitely so if you're new and it's like gonna be getting the beginning of the season, you can set it up so they can prioritize yours. So when we were first certified, let's see, we started building our farm and set everything up in 2017, and then we wanted to be out there at markets in April of 2018. And because of their cycle, wanting to be out there so early in the spring, we definitely had to request that things get done quickly. And I think generally with a new operation like that, or if you're bringing a new land that you want to start harvesting off of that season, a good certifier will help that happen for you promptly. If you really stress that, as we did when we were starting, like we need to be certified because we need to be organic from day one at the market. And so, yeah, there's ways to go about doing that. And again, that's finding a good certifier, communicating with them. Sometimes it might be paying an extra fee to expedite things, but certainly, like you said, getting that process started as soon as you can, the better, because the sooner that you're under that umbrella of organic, the better. If that's the direction you want to be going, for sure.
Right. Okay. So, do you find the certifiers in the National Organic Program Manual? Or
So the easiest way to find a good list is with the Organic Integrity Database, which is a searchable database. You can search for every single certifier. You can search for every single certified operation. But a good way is if you go to the Organic Integrity Database and go whatever state you're in. So if you're in West Virginia here, you can go and limit you can search for like all the operations in West Virginia, and then you can go and it lists who their certifier is. So you could go there, look who all the different certifiers are that are certifying in West Virginia. And usually it's state to state. So some will only do in one state or in the adjacent states. Some are national. But generally, if you do that, you'll find that there's probably a handful that people are using in your area. And that I would recommend as a good starting point. Because they're the ones who already have inspectors coming out to your area. Sometimes you do have to pay for like the inspector's travel expenses. So wanting somebody who's nearby or at the very least is coming to see other operations where then that cost gets divided amongst operations is definitely why you want to consider somebody who's already certifying in your area. And again, you usually have a handful of choices, and there's, you contact them and find out there's different fee schedules. So that's definitely not everybody charges the same. So there's definitely are differences between certifiers, and finding one that is a good fit for you is definitely worth the investment to make, because they're the ones who like will make or break you in that relationship for sure. I mean, they can, like, obviously you can be to your own detriment if you're not doing things, but having that good relationship, I stress that here, and I know I've stressed that in some other talks, but that relationship is very, very important. So taking time to find somebody in your home area. And again, that's the Organic Integrity Database is a great search tool for that sort of thing.
Okay, would they be like a mentor to you if you were trying to start out? Or is there a guideline for the steps you take? Like, where do you find the application?
Yeah. So they have what are called certification specialists is the basically the would be your individual person that you would be working with. So the certification specialist should help you, especially when it comes to stuff that's proprietary to them, like their application and so on. They're not just going to say, send it to us. They're going to say, here's what you need to fill out. Here are the forms. Here's what our fee schedule is. They're not going to say, here's a better way necessarily. They're not going to say, here's a better way to deal with, this pest. They may, but it's so in terms of them, like in terms of them being like a mentor or consultant type thing, it's more like they're not going to provide you information like that unprompted, but anything you ask of them, they'll probably try to help and answer. Or at least point you to someone else who can, like maybe there's another farm in your area they know of, and they would say, hey, actually, I don't know if it's certified. Had seed reps do that with the confidentiality. I don't know if they can do that, but I mean, you go on the database and see that. So that information, I guess they could say that because
Okay.
yeah, it's public information who's certified by whom. So, but they're not going to try to withhold information. They're going to try to help you. But again, it's more, I don't know. Does that make sense? It's not like how to farm. It's more like here, like making sure that you are doing what you are doing is within the guidelines.
Yeah, it seems like you would be, it would be better if, or helpful if you knew someone who is already certified and you could kind of, shadow them for a while.
Uh, Well, there is the top mentorship program where you
There you
can get paired with a mentee, someone who is farming organically, and I've signed up to be a mentor in that. It's new for me, so I don't have a whole lot of experience to that yet. But I think that's the idea behind that component of the top program is the top mentorship program. So if anyone here watching this is interested in organic farming and transitioning and would like a more one-on-one, and the mentors will tell you, and like the idea is they're going to share everything with you to really get you up and running. It's definitely just something trying for the organic community to grow and help itself. So if you're looking for that sort of guidance, then the top mentorship program might be for you, and I would recommend looking that up. And
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely. You can
and
get in
maybe it's Ben
contact with
here.
that. Yeah, Julie's here. She's going to be that great resource to connect you with one of those mentors through the Food and Farm Coalition. There she is. So yes, absolutely. If you are interested in mentorship, you can contact us, send us a message, and we can get you in contact with Julie, who will in turn pair you with a mentor. That could be Mike. So, Julie, did anyone else have any questions before I turn over the floor for Julie? This is kind of a great transition for us. Transition, huh? We're transitioning to organic production. Go ahead, Julie.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh,
Every time. No, I thought you hit it pretty well, Mike. The experience that you described has pretty much been, the experiences that I've had, through the years, both, being, like from the grower and from the, like the inspector side. No, the only thing I was going to add is that the TOPP program, Transition to Organic Partnership Program, that you just mentioned, I would say that's more of the place to get the mentor. Like Mike said, if you have specific questions, your certifying agency is definitely there to help you. But at that point, I think they're kind of expecting you to have a good deal of knowledge, and they'll help you with some of like the the confusing parts or the nuances or the finer points and, and things like that. But just like to start at the beginning, the TOPP program can provide you with what I would describe more as a mentor. And that being said, with the Food and Farm Coalition, we've been having these things on Sunday nights, like once a month, barnyard banter. And basically it's kind of two parts. So we try and keep it to an hour or less. And in the first half, we have a topic and kind of like a quick informal presentation, sort of chit chatty, and then we move into actual chit chat. And so it's kind of a place where a dedicated time and place for people who are in TOPP to just banter about what their experiences have been. And then anybody else who might be interested can also, join in and listen and participate. So we've got one coming up this Sunday. It's at 8:00. And I tried to schedule it so that, like, the working cool part of the day is coming to a close and you're tired, and you're coming in. And so it'll start at 8, and we're adding maybe like bringing a little bit of fun. So we're going to have a game night. And so there will be a game and a cool prize, which you need to be present to win.
Yes.
And I won't reveal what the prize is yet, so you'll have to show up. But anyway, check the West Virginia Farm Coalition website and Facebook page, and you can grab a link there and come.
Absolutely. You can join Julie. That is this Sunday, May 19th, 2024. Wanted to preface that with the time and the date there in case you're watching this at a later time and date. But those do go on every month, right, Julie, for the
Yes.
season. So is it, would that be the third Sunday of every month?
It's been the last Sunday. This one is going to be the third Sunday. But yeah, it's probably going to be like the second half of the month.
Very good. Very good. And one more point that we didn't get to through our conversation here through the mentorship program is at the end of the mentorship program, there's also a stipend towards your certification. Yes, that's right. So not only does you get the knowledge from the mentor, you also get some support as you make that commitment to certification. So if we don't have any other questions tonight, and we're all good, then we will call tonight a close, and then we will see you all next month, or we will see you on Julie's call, and that is May 19th, 8 p.m. And you can go to foodandfarmcoalition.com. No, do not go to that. Go to Julie, what's the website to register?
Yeah, it's the Facebook for Food and Farm Coalition.
Okay. Very good. I just wanted to make sure that I didn't say it wrong and send people to the wrong place. So that's perfect. So thank you guys for being here tonight, and we will see you soon.
Okay. Yeah. Peace out.
Bye.
Thank you.